Okay, I'd like to call the meeting for the Neighbors of Dunn County Standing Committee to order here, August 28th. And we have a quorum. We have 3 of us. Is there anybody online? Okay, and Jane is here along with Chris at our table. And is there any public comment? And I think not. We certainly have the people around.
Here.
Yes, and yeah, Chair McCullough is with us too. Number 4, we'll get there quickly. Consideration for action to be taken by the committee review of the fiscal year 2025 budget. And you're on.
All right. So it was sent out in the packet is the overall budget, and Jane is also pulling it up on the screen. So I handed out ones, you have them physically. They're also going to be on the screen if you would like to look at that very small print. But yes, so that you have.
Sorry, I appreciate the handout because I was trying to look at it online and my eyes were crossing.
It's a lot of information.
Yeah.
So it is broken down. The first page has a campus summary, and that's probably the most useful piece for all of you because it combines all of the information that's in the very lengthy packet. And it has breakdowns for each building as well as a campus as a whole, which we do budget separately for each building just because each building has different census numbers, different requirements, things like that. But when we truly look at it, we break it down as the whole neighbor's campus because sometimes, especially when a household is closed, one building might perform better or less than the whole, but it all equals out in the end. So if you would like us to go, I guess the question to all of you is, how would you like us to explain this? Would you like us to go section by section, building by building, campus as a whole? It does show that we are on the good side of things, so in the black, and not having to use any general fund in the budgeting standpoint. So that is a positive. But please tell me what you would like us to do, or what if you have questions of what you have reviewed.
How about if we do the campus as a whole rather than individual?
Okay,
And then if we want to break it out and have questions about it, we could ask.
sure.
That Barb, Gordy, have you got another one?
I don't. You guys are looking.
We could share.
Okay.
Okay.
We only have it broken out. We don't have a consolidated line item budget. So if we go through one, it would be similar to the other 3. If that works for you.
Yeah.
For example, this is the East summary. And then it's the same as the PDF that was sent out, and it has revenues at the top of the green bar. And then all
we need to fix it.
Page 2 of 10.
2 of 10. Yep.
It should say on the bottom.
There we go. Thank you. Got it. Yeah.
So everything above that is your revenues in detail, and everything below that is all the expenses by sub-department, by each line item. Want me to explain each line item?
Well,
or how?
I guess that's a question for all of you. How much detail would you like us to explain?
Why don't you start just going through each line item, and then as we get the hang of it, we'll.
Okay. For some reason, medical supplies was broken out separately on previous versions, so we just kept with the previous template, but that's consistent. The contractual adjustment is representing, say, we charge Medicaid $100, but we know they're only going to pay $80. So that contractual adjustment is in there, and also the revenue would reflect what we're actually charging. So behind the scenes, that all balances. Bed tax is for the private pay people. Sequestration is a an amount that's built into the Medicare A rates later on. The OBRA screens are for every a revenue for every resident we get in. We have to do an assessment, and the state pays us, I think, $20 for each of those. PCS care is the overall everybody's room and board. So that's the 6 million, which is higher than last year's budget of 5.2. And this is just for the East building. That reflects the increase in Medicaid rates that we're expecting and a 4.2% increase in Medicare rates. Medicare and VA rates usually go up at the same percentage, and Medicaid is the rates as they go up. That's your family care and some of your family care hospice. So we've consolidated that into one line of PCS care. And your private pay is in there too. So that's
You said-
the whole.
You said that's 6 million?
6 million.
In the packet was printed slightly,
Oh,
so,
was it different?
flip to east. The packet's printed first with central and you're on
Oh.
east, sorry.
Oh, well, I'm
There's
sorry.
page 2 of 10 of each building, so
I can
I
go-
just noticed that too. So
I'll
pull
go
up
to central.
central. That's
I'll do
what's first in the
central.
packet.
Okay, so 4.832 is what you see, right?
Okay, thank
We
you.
were
Okay.
looking at 2 different buildings.
Yeah. And Central's is a little bit lower because it's not planned to be fully occupied.
Mhm.
So there you see the difference, mainly the difference in occupancy. And then the rent goes on to Central, that's the land rent. Transportation, which is new in the last couple years, Medicaid transportation rate reimbursement is higher. So now we are able to actually break even with the transportation that we have to supply. So we get bills, there's an expense, and then there's also a revenue. It's about break even though. And miscellaneous building rental is the hairdresser.
Oh,
Yep, she pays a little bit of rent every month to have
Use their
her
space.
spot. Yep. So we've got the transportation revenue. We've got no bistro being budgeted this year and no expense either. So about the same.
If it were to come back, it wouldn't affect the budget because it would be offsetting.
Senior meals is something that's just on the central budget. That's the revenue. The expense would be further down the page. 183, and it was 186 last year. It kind of ebbs and flows.
I was just curious as to why the adopted budget for,
Your mic.
You want to turn the mic on?
didn't want to squeeze in.
Okay, we'll get those.
Sorry about that. The adopted budget for the first line, the medical supplies, last year, 2024, is 1687, but this year it's 18,000. Do we have a projected budget of budget of 18,000?
I will look into that.
Thank you.
Good eyes. It takes a village.
I believe that is just a typo,
That could be a typo, yeah.
because on the other buildings, it is similar to past years, so I believe that's a typo.
Rehab revenues and then there's some blanks. So the total revenue expected in Central is 5,119,461 minus about 10,000, which is an increase because of the prices raising. Any questions on the revenue for Central?
Is it just because of the prices rose, or is there more occupants in Central than there was?
So this is budgeted for having 8 households open, so exactly what we have this year. So 8 of the 9 households being open, Central would have still 1 closed household. The increase in the prices basically is Medicaid rates have increased. So that's the majority of the increase is due to Medicaid rate increases. It is budgeted for the same occupancy that we did for 2024.
Then on bottom of page 2 of 10, going to page 3 of 10 is the administration budget. That covers Carmen's and Chris's salaries and some general things that aren't specific to nursing or activities or dietary. Insurance is in this category. What else do we have? Some telephone expense. Provider assessment, you'll see on page 3. It's the third one down. That's what we pay to the state for every bed every month. So we pay the state and then they come and survey us, and it, I guess, nets out to a 0 at the state level.
Could you catch Sheila up as where we're at?
We're on page 3 of 10.
Currently 3 lines down from the top.
Yep. Do you want to go through each one, or should just ask me questions on the ones that you have questions on?
Well, let's look at it here and see if
Okay.
we do have some questions.
Okay. Internal financial services. That is the like my salary and the billers that get charged out to NDC.
A clarifying question, Jane.
Hmm?
So I'm thinking that when you said the total revenue was 5 million some odd things, right? That's adding everything up for revenue, and then you have a total expense line as well at
Correct.
the bottom of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think if you look between the total revenue line and the total expense line, that's sort of a frame of reference to see if there's any big questions in between there about particular line items.
Okay.
One falls in one bucket, one falls in the other bucket.
I'm curious about on page 3 of 10 there, right in the middle, I think it's a subtotal 1.109 million.
That is everything under the cost center for NDC administration.
Right.
So
It's about 3 times as big as last year. I'm looking at 300.
legal services was an increase. That was based on past things. I'm looking at all the
I see
increases.
contribution general fund 780,000.
Yep.
What's that?
That's the difference between the revenue and the expenses in the end.
So that is what we are positive in the black. So we cannot technically make a income on our budget. So that would be what we would transfer into the general fund at the end of the year. Because we are, for our expenses compared to our revenues, we are currently budgeting to be in the black based on our trends and everything. So that would be what would be transferred to the general fund. So that's considered an expense in this because it is coming out of our checkbook, basically.
Yep,
The
it's-
neighbors
it's
fund.
where the excess funds go. And that's up to the committee or the board, how that excess will be deposited at the last of the year. Does it go toward our outstanding debt? Because for the last audit, we were over $2 million in debt to the fund. So will this offset our debt for operations, or will it go toward
Actually, I
the
think the
bond?
auditor, I believe the auditor does that because it's showing a cumulative owed to the general fund. And then at the end of this year, you're in the black, it's going to reduce that amount before it sends it over to the general fund.
So there's a priority of paying off our regular
What's been
operational
borrowed.
debt,
Yep.
our operational debt before we would pay off the other debt.
Yeah, so the core of your question is about why it's 3 times, and that 3 times is almost entirely that operational excess that has to be paid back to the general fund. So it isn't actually a larger expense in terms of the neighbors creating greater expense. It's what to do with the money that is in excess.
Right, it's how that moves behind the scenes.
We're not used to that.
I know it. I know it. It's a new concept. It's wonderful to have an excess in many years.
No, we had it on, It's not the first time that we, at the end of the year, it has come out in an excess. It is the first time that when we're budgeting, that it had come out in an excess. We had had years that we had budgeted a minor deficit or made it up with different cuts and general fund use and things like that. And then the end of the year, it came out with an excess. That happened 3 years ago, if I'm counting backwards right, 2 years ago, that we ended up having an excess in funds at the end of the year. But on the budget going into the year, it has not happened that we have had a planned contribution to the general fund.
Okay, so that's the kind of thing that if you see other things like that, point them out now.
Yep, that is,
So that's a big one.
Yeah, I really
that is
like
the
that
new
one.
and different.
But,
That was on my list, absolutely.
Okay.
And that we put in the administrative budget.
I'm not sure that I'm doing this correctly, but if you look at last year's adopted and this year's proposed surplus, that should be very, very close to this year's proposed budget. Because if things don't change much. Am I correct with that?
I didn't understand yet.
So the
Yeah.
big difference here again goes back to the Medicaid rates. So when we made the 2024 budget, so a year ago, those rates were not there yet. So what was the 2024 adopted budget? We had no surplus, and then we had increased rates, and that's why we now have a surplus.
Yes, and if you took out that line, yes, they would be very similar to the last year's numbers. Another change in budgeting, when you look at the nursing salaries, we have an additional breakout. The CNAs, LPNs, and RNs had all been budgeted under one sub-department called nursing. This year, we're breaking that out into CNA, LPN, and RN so that our reporting to the state can be more accurate and less manual for the sorting of all the dollars. So if you see on that second line of nursing, it says attendance hours. Last year is budgeted for 1.8 million. This year it's 209,000. So those are spread out in those next categories on the further down the page.
If I may. The surplus we're talking about on page 3, is that just for central or is that including all the buildings?
That is just for
All
central.
right, thank you.
So each building will have a line item that is surplus to go back.
So to bring you, kind of circle you back, and I did include a copy of it again for tonight. The note that I did for you a couple of months ago about sort of the history.
Mhm.
So in 2020, in 2021, NDC returned $1.3 million to the general fund. In 2022, they borrowed. The general fund lent them $2 million. In 2023, the general fund lent them $700,000. But with the change of Medicare rates and the stabilization of staffing,
Medicaid rates.
and the stabilization of staffing, we anticipate that they will return at this point in time someplace between 500 and a million, 500,000 and a million in 2024, and then now close to 2 million in 2025.
Well, yeah, 2 million, it's for East, I think it's East, 1.3. And what we're looking at now is 0.7, so that's 2 just on 2 buildings.
Right. Yep.
That's getting more exciting all the time.
It is getting more exciting all the time.
Well, and I believe part of that is because on the state level, they heard that nursing homes were not going to make it. And we have an aging population and they had to do something. They don't always respond quite so quickly, but they have responded pretty quickly on this particular, not for years, and then all of gradually, and then suddenly.
And one of the things that has been good with that most recent change in Medicaid rates was it was not just a one-time increase. It was a change in methodology of how rates are set. So that's another important thing to point out, that we're not only going to reap the benefits of this 1 year, it should continue to go up because it's based on the median cost. So it's not just 1 year they gave us 2%, or 1 year they gave us 15% like it used to be. It's actually a rate setting module. So it will continue to go up as well.
And so the idea is at this point in time, the general fund has issued an IOU, or the NDC has issued an IOU to the general fund in the amount of about $2.8 million, $2.8 million. And the idea would be that they would recoup some of that this year and the remainder of it that next year, and be back to the zero mark.
Also very exciting when I consider, the 19 years that I was on the board and we were giving them $100,000, I think, a year toward
On
their
average.
budget. For their budget, and they were still losing money even in spite of that. And it's just the problems that we had with whether or not we were going to keep it or not keep it, or go private or not go private. And we just really fought for it. And this is a real reward. Thank you.
I don't know what else you want to look at. The other expenses are pretty routine. Transportation, radiology, the therapies, social services and life enhancement are pretty much just the salaries.
So the other thing to look at is there's no big changes. And I think that's something to highlight, is that we're not adding any positions. We're not taking away any positions. We're not doing any major crazy remodel things. There's no different structure of any of our services. So it's pretty status quo, especially, I know this is a fairly newer committee of people, but it is pretty similar to the years past. We're not doing anything drastic. It is just a change in the cost of things. So we did increase the cost of things like food. As you see, when you go to the grocery store, things are more expensive. Those increase. It includes the salary and fringe increases. And then on the flip side, as we've talked about, it also includes the increases in revenue. So, but nothing operationally has drastically changed.
And the other thing to note is that when it comes to salary, there's really actually two categories. There are the wages paid to county staff, people employed by Dunn County. That's a dollar amount, about 10-ish.
10 million
10
normally,
million-ish.
roughly.
And there is a contract or a leased staff cost, an agency staff cost. And we play those two numbers between each other. So if we employ more county people, the agency staff costs come down. If we employ more agency staff plus the county costs come down, we watch the total number.
We budget for a fully staffed NDC staff, and then we budget for the increment in the agency staff. So the budgeted numbers may not look like the reality, because in the total, they're going to balance out.
Yeah. Is that why, under central, right at the, 4, LPN and CNA pool help, in the proposed budget is 0.
Under nursing or under CNA or LPN?
It says LPN right at the very top.
Oh,
Very top.
So we broke them out this time.
That's
Okay.
part of the putting them down below in the
Oh, that's
next
just where,
category.
okay. That's
Around.
Okay, got it.
So on the top of page 5, under LPN, the last line under LPN,
Oh,
it will help. We're budgeting for 21,178 there.
We just made it in its own cost center this time, for the reporting purpose. So it just moved. It's still in there.
That was my question to it. The numbers in that first section where only 10% of what they were
Yeah.
before, but they haven't changed that much. They just moved.
Yes.
They moved. So nursing as a whole is stable.
Did it to the government centers.
Probably upstairs would be my guess as to where they'll come. Because I was talking about 5, so I'd go to the front.
So as Jane was explaining, for those, we only budget the increment that it will cost on top of an NDC staff for pool help. That was something that was changed, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. We used to budget them both full and then it was double budgeting, but we just budget how much it costs in addition to what it would cost for an NDC staff. So we're not over budgeting those numbers.
These are really exciting numbers for someone who's on this committee 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. I said, it is a good time for you to come to this meeting. Yeah, good timing.
Yes.
Well, you pointed out a few of the interesting or a little bit of changes as far as the way it's reported, and you summarized it right now really well, as there's not a whole lot of change other than on the bottom line, and you mostly Medicaid. Okay. So are there any other blank spots in there that you're looking at, or bigger numbers, or you're wondering why they're not there? Let's check them out.
Just had one question, and that's down on the VA.
What page are you
That's
on?
the second, page 5.
Page 5.
Second from the bottom. And is that because there's more veterans now utilizing the services, or what is that about?
So if you look at the columns, the first column is 6,200, then it says the neighbors, then it says the numbers, and then it says NDCC laboratory. Those are just lab charges, what we expect it to be. So the column the fourth column tells you which type of charge, and then we have to define it from there, even every charge that we get in. And yes, we have a very high veteran population compared to what we used to have. So, yep, that's why that piece is larger.
Did you go with the 3.5% increase that we talked about?
Yes, for the private pay rate.
Yeah.
Yep, we did. Yep. And these numbers may change a little bit. This is what was published under round 1 and then adjusted a little bit from Beata's payroll calculations. There'll be some fine tuning coming up so that even beyond this, based on what I see for trends for dietary expense and other miscellaneous expenses, just to make sure that we're budgeting correctly. So the amount that we give back to the general fund could be a little bit off, less than $100,000. But I'm just going back and fine tuning a few things.
And salary and fringe, we're all considering the increases that have been proposed.
Yeah, if there's, depending on what happens both tonight and at future county board meetings of changes to the overall county board that could affect every department, that also could affect this, like the salary and fringe, the work comp, I believe that option would have a potential of affecting this. So there's a few different things that could still change this. The majority of those changes, and under my assumption, would actually lower our expenses. So what it's at right now is fairly close. The only thing that might raise it would be the changes in trends things, but everything that could be a countywide trend or countywide change would actually lower our expenses and then have our end bottom line actually be even better.
Of course, if you lower the salaries, you might have more pool people.
Correct. That is true. So it would change the budget. It may not actually change the overall outcome at the end, though.
Okay. Anything else? Barb or Cordy or Jane?
If you don't mind. And we've been discussing Central, but the other houses seem to fall in about the same line, and they're they're behaving themselves in accordance with what you're showing us on the first line?
Yeah, Central would actually be typically the lowest performer because we have all the overhead costs with less people. But in line item to line item, it is the same. It's just different numbers per building.
Yeah, we split it out by census numbers that were expected. So we've done some census work and projecting ahead of splitting out the numbers.
It's
Wait,
where
yeah.
your
Just
pe-
make sure you can hear it.
central is where the people that have hip replacements, knee replacements may go.
Typically,
So that's the difference.
it is both. We have more of our short-term residents are in the central building. That being said, we do admit to the outer buildings for short-term at times. For example, right now, both of our households in central have COVID. So we're admitting short-term people to outer buildings. So we aren't limited to only admitting there, but typically, yes, that is where our short-term go. Any other questions for myself or Jane?
I think we could look for a motion to approve it.
I would like to make a motion to approve the proposed budget for the neighbors.
And I'll second that motion.
And note that that's for 2025.
Mhm.
Yeah. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? There are no opposed, unanimous. So it passes. Nice job, Jane, Carmen, and you guys for looking it over and asking questions. So, anything else? Anything else, Jane, or no? We're adjourned.
And we got you guys pizza, because you have to be here through the hall, so feel free to come on over and grab a
Oh.
pizza.